All right, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, we are all here to talk about direct statewide contracting with local beef producers. This is a spotlight with some Utah folks about their Local Food for Schools program. My name is Cassandra Bull, and I am a policy specialist with the National Farm to School Network. I am also the Q&A panel moderator today. And I am so thrilled to be joined with our panelists, presenters. They are Natalie McHale, who is a farm to school marketing specialist with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. Danielle Perez, who is a farm to school and procurement specialist with the Utah State Board of Education. Sarah Jane Snowden, who is the owner and manager of Snowden Meats, and Kate Wheeler, who is a farm to school specialist at the USDA Food and Nutrition Service Southwest region. A little bit about the National Farm to School Network. We're a national organization. Our mission is to increase access to local food and nutrition education with the goal to improve children's health, strengthen family farms, and cultivate vibrant communities. We have a national staff and advisory board, 20,000 network members and partners in all 50 states and some US territories. For our agenda today, I'm going to give an introduction, currently halfway through it, and then we're going to shift gears to a panel discussion. So no slides, just chatting and some questions. And then we'll have a Q&A portion at the end. So if you have questions throughout this entire hour, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we'll try to get to them at the end. And if we don't, we'll get to them and we'll send a follow-up with additional URLs and documentation and all of the great PDFs we'll be mentioning throughout this call. We're all here because of a program called the USDA Local Food for Schools Cooperative Agreement. And so basically the way I describe this is that it's a federally funded state-level local food purchasing incentive programs. So it was launched in spring of 2022. It's a one-time infusion of funds, and that's because it's a COVID-19 relief program. But basically it offered up to $200 million in funding from the Commodity Credit Corporation. And it's a non-competitive cooperative agreement program from the USDA with state agencies for the explicit purpose of purchasing local, unprocessed, or minimally processed foods, with a special priority of socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, and small businesses. So there's a little caveat at the bottom here that there's a bunch of other federal COVID-19 relief programs, like the Local Food Purchasing Assistance, Farm to School State Formula Grants, Supply Chain Assistance Funds, and many others that sort of supplement and complement this program, but we're really focused on Local Food for Schools today. And we're here to spotlight Utah because they're doing something that I think is really special. On the left, you'll see this graphic of what a local food purchasing incentive model is. So currently there are state-level programs that have been running for decades that are local food purchasing incentives. And then this is sort of mirrored in Local Food for Schools as well. But basically, it's where state agencies give funding to child nutrition programs so that they do or that they can purchase local food from farmers, producers, hubs, and distributors. We're sort of talking about a different model today, which we're calling a farmer-focused incentive, where basically state agencies flip the script and they contract directly with local farmers, producers, hubs, and distributors to get local food into child nutrition programs. So it's unique because less than 10 states are using this sort of framework for local food for schools. There's no permanent state-level program designed like this. It's sort of an innovation that came out of COVID-19. And I just want to mention that it's more common designed with other organizations through the local food purchasing assistance. Things like food banks are sort of doing this model, but it's really rare in the school and ECE space. Last slide. Our goals today are to support incentive policy innovation across the nation by spotlighting our partners, increase awareness of unique and innovative incentive models, And we're here today to glean insight and the lessons learned from implementation from the stakeholders with firsthand experience with these models, and hear their advice about how to improve these programs if other state advocates are really interested in replicating this model. And so this is the second session. We had a spotlight last month based in Vermont, and they're having a unique model of subcontracting directly with food hubs. But today we're hearing from Utah about contracting with producers specifically. So that's the end of my slides. I'm going to spotlight Natalie, Kate, Danny, and Sarah Jane. And my first question is, I think it's to Kate, and it's, how does your program work? Tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks, Cassandra. And I'll just say too that I'm just still going to say we. So when we started forming this program, I was in Danny's position at USBE, and I'm still in Utah. So the language is going to get weird if I try to talk about it any other way. So just know that that's why I'm speaking on that in this role for everyone. But so we handled the procurement as a state really from start to finish. So we created a bid process, wrote the solicitation, put it out, and that was structured so that we would be awarding as many contracts to anyone who hit above a minimum score. And that was to help us kind of support small producers too. Like, you didn't have to be able to cover the whole state or cover a certain area. We weren't looking for just one producer, we were looking for variety. And so we did this focusing on beef and bison products. So we handled all the procurement, put the contracts in place, and then the schools are able to make purchases directly from those contracted producers, and the schools get reimbursed by us. And the goal there, I had some people asking, like, why aren't you just reimbursing the producers? And we want this to look like as normal of a purchase as possible. Eventually this funding is going to go away. We would love our schools to keep working with these producers and keep doing that. So we want those channels and those communication channels to already be put in place. The other thing is that we already have a mechanism in place as a state agency administering child nutrition programs to reimburse schools for things, and getting new vendors in there can be difficult and tricky. And we didn't want to put an extra burden on producers that are selling to schools for the very first time. So really the goal with the structure is that we took the procurement burden off of the schools, but moving forward, all of it just feels like normal procurement for both the schools and the producers.
Great. Thanks, Kate. And yeah, Danny, do you have anything to add to that? So Danny is Kate's successor at the Board of Education. I should make that clear. Danny, anything to add?
Yeah, and successor sounds so fancy, but yes, that's me. First of all, I'm just grateful to be a part of this like smart, talented, all-women panel right now. And I think from my perspective, and just kind of going off on what you said, Cassandra, and what Kate said, it's just been a really unique way to bridge the gap between local producers and schools. And I've seen it actually empower schools to communicate and create relationships directly with local producers in their respective regions. So that's been fun to see, and it's working on a practical level right now. And then I do want to say that it also just supported those maybe socially disadvantaged regional meat producers and accessing those specific markets that Kate was talking about. And I think Kate and Natalie would agree that falls in line with a lot of our strategic planning with Utah Farm to Fork. Because one of the goals that we have is that we want to collectively increase those market opportunities, right, for small producers, through a model that supports like all of this education in local food and specific communication channels that Kate kind of mentioned, and that local infrastructure that we do have.
Yeah, thanks for adding that context. And I should say that Danny graciously provided the solicitation language and how the bids were set up, all of those sort of technical things that are outside of my expertise, but are so important for replication. So those will all go out after this, and hopefully they'll be informative to some folks on this call. Kate, I'm going to throw it back to you. Since you were here at the beginning, how did you develop this program? Like, what was the thought process?
Yeah, So I had really been wanting to explore this idea of state level contracting for a while, because there are products that every single child nutrition program uses and that we can buy locally. Like ground beef is one of those, apples, other whole tree fruits, milk. And so I really wanted us to see if we could take some of that burden off and create state level contracts like we already have as a state for so many other things, right? We have a contract with Home Depot, so you can just order your whatever supplies from there, or Office Max, and like, can we do that with local producers to lessen that procurement barrier for the schools? That said, there was also like a barrier in terms of resources internally, where it's like, this is a new thing and a heavy lift, and I think a lot of the question was like, you're going to ask like our procurement division that never does this to do a special thing, and you can't promise it'll work. So there was a real opportunity with this funding then to say, well, we need to use this funding, and we need to figure out a model to distribute it. And so we do always want to make sure that our farm to school work is beneficial to our schools and our producers, and that we're building programs based on their needs and wants, and not just doing a program to do it because we have the money or another state is doing it and it looks good. And so we had a town hall with our school food authorities, and they basically all said, we like this idea, but we're not going to be able to do this procurement. Like, we don't have the capacity right now, especially when you're saying you got to target socially disadvantaged farmers and there's these special rules. And we also in Utah don't have any food hubs or distributors who are really working that farm to school space that would be good to subcontract with. And I said, okay, well, we could take on the procurement. I can't do the ordering and the warehousing and all of that. That's a whole other job also. But knowing that we could handle the procurement, would you order the products then? And the schools were really on board with that. So the next step of that was to really say, like, what product do we have a large enough producer base of in the state of Utah to spend those funds? Because just from a capacity standpoint, also, I was like, I can't do like a full menu procurement, right? Like, we can't be doing first time out with this limited time period. We can't be doing fruit contracts and veggie contracts and grains. And so I was like, we have a lot of meat producers in Utah. And the other thing is that we knew with looking at that type of product, we were going to have socially disadvantaged and small producers who were still big enough to sell to our schools. We have some other great like, small farming initiatives, especially in our urban areas with, say, refugee farming or things like that, but they're small, like really small. So, if you're only doing 20 CSAs right now, you probably don't want or need a school market to try to start serving that without a lot of infrastructure and like big time investment. Whereas a lot of our ranchers, we were able to say, in whatever size you are is enough that we can get some beef out there.
Yeah, that's so exciting about the town hall and hearing those needs and responding to them. And I think that's why I find this program so refreshing and unique, is that it was really developed around those needs, especially because like COVID-19 was happening at this time. And so the already strapped food service managers were even more strapped. So that's really great. Danny, I see that you have a background, farm to fork, you and Natalie. And before last year, we highlighted Kate to talk about the existing local food purchasing incentive already in Utah. So I'm wondering if you want to share a little bit about what else is going on in farm to school and how this sort of complements those efforts already in your state.
Oh, yes, great question. And I'll just preface a little bit with my background. I do have a background in dietetics and nutrition. I'm a registered dietitian, and I've worked alongside a lot of community-based nutrition, different events that have been happening in that sense, and a lot of like local food systems that are happening. So I found that this program kind of intersects really well with how we're gauging nutrition security, ag education, food literacy in general, and access to like those healthy local foods, which we all know are just higher quality foods. So in my realm, I've seen local food purchases increase the visibility of school meals and quality-driven school meals as a whole. We also have this enhanced local reimbursement program where the Utah State Board of Education, so the state agency of where I work, sets aside about $250,000 a year to award schools who have purchased any locally grown, unprocessed food from Utah. So right now, our state agency has been on this trend of talking about values-based procurement, which ideally is how we want to go about procurement anyway. So values-based procurement is procurement, right? And with this particular LFS grant, I feel like it's elevated the way we talked about purchasing food and has already provided so many educational opportunities and those communication channels that Kate mentioned that intersect with like the school and community events. So these have included a lot of like school lunch promotional events that we've seen that Natalie and I have been able to attend, or like cooking or culinary workshops, connecting local food history with education in the classroom. And I really truly believe that policy support and policies that incentivize local food purchasing can also just encourage similar practices in other institutions or other programs. So I'm excited to see what the future holds with it too.
Yeah, I'm gonna grill you about the future later. So I'm excited to hear more about what you're gonna say. Natalie, I'll pass it to you. So I know that you are at the Department of Ag, and so Danny's from the Department of Ed. How does this relate to your work on the other side of things?
Yeah, I think Danny touched on a lot of what my job and role is. So I was brought on to kind of bring in more farmers, just like within the Utah Department of Ag, and a lot of the resources we have there, whether it's, our soil health department that works with farmers and might be able to connect us with, different avenues and groups that we hadn't connected with before. And also a lot of the marketing is not just to say, hey, this is what farm to school is doing, but also marketing within the schools. So, when there is local food on the plates, the students know. And we have heard a lot of even schools saying, like, before we put up the posters you created showcasing what ranch or meat is from that day, students were commenting just that it tasted different and better. So that's really exciting. And then Sarah, who will chat later, she even went above and beyond and created a marketing video that showed her family on the ranch. And that's been really cool for those schools to showcase, and adds into that agricultural literacy component that Danny touched on. Just to show, this is a family thing. Of course, they bark when they haven't barked this entire time. And then just the scratch cooking component too, that's huge. If you are going to incorporate more local food on your plates, you do need to have that skill set. And so we're doing a lot of those workshops that we've done prior, but just adding a whole new level here. Like we'll be doing one specifically with bison since we did source bison. So really just that agricultural literacy part, and just really, not just putting the food on the plates, but showing the importance and embedding that in the staff. That's huge. So like we've talked a lot, is making sure even when this funding is gone, that it's a sustainable program, because the schools see the value of local ag. And they're also meeting their farmers. It's not just, hey, here's the number to call, but they're discussing how they want their meat, and ranches are giving them tips for, cooking it, like noticing like, hey, it cooks down a little bit different. Here's some tips. And this is why it's happening. And we've seen these email threads, and there's just these wonderful relationships being built between schools and farms. We were with one of our ranchers this weekend, and he was like, you guys changed my life. Like, this is like a whole new route of selling our meat that I never thought was possible. So props to you, Kate. Want to make sure we pass that along to you. Just really like getting the importance of local and ag around.
Yeah, that's really excellent. Thanks for sharing that story. And I think there's something about the beauty of having the procurement done at the state level, that you talk about advertising and supporting marketing. And so once you know the producers, you can then institutionalize that kind of support and replicate it, right? So you know who the producers are, and then you can do that work rather than having the onus be on the food service director for all of that additional marketing. And there's more time in planning and stuff like that. So I think that's a hidden success there, or a hidden benefit. Okay. Now, so we sort of talked about the context and the planning, and we're partway through this program. So the next set of questions are all going to be implementation based. And I'm wondering, Danny, I'll ask you first as sort of the coordinator, and then Sarah Jane, I really want to hear from you about how it's going.
Yeah, so at least in my perspective, implementation has been going really well, and I'll have Sarah Jane kind of talk more about that, or some of the unique challenges. But just to provide a little more context, we do have 6 total producers or local meat vendors, one of which is on this call. So Sarah Jane, thank you for being here and shout out to you. So they're all within that criteria of small and or socially disadvantaged, and all within that statewide contract that Kate helped develop. So our total funding from USDA LFS was around 1.9 million. And that was initially allocated to about 135 schools under Utah, so school food authorities that are operating with the National School Lunch Program. And then schools basically order from the vendors and pay them directly. We kind of talked about that background a little bit. And then the schools submit invoices to us in a Utah grant system, and that's just an online system. And that's the online statewide grant system that we have. And then I do want to mention that part of the funding includes like a separate competitive grant with Ute Tribal Enterprises, and that was awarded to 4 total schools. And that was purchasing about 1,000 pounds of bison raised by the Ute tribe, which has been such a unique and special opportunity. So we have been heavily promoting that and celebrating that. And Natalie's done such an amazing job with promoting that as well. So we've organized a Ute bison cooking workshop with the amazing Chef Tamara, who works at Hell's Backbone Grill in Boulder, Utah. So we're super duper excited for that event. So that's just one part of this grant that's come from that. But now we did receive a 12-month extension to keep using these LFS funds, or to have schools continue using these funds for the summer and next school year. So up until 2025, May 2025. So right now, reallocations of the funds are happening based on schools' interests for extra funding, or really if they're using the money appropriately. But that's how it's going right now.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll just, I'll clarify, I think you mentioned this to me when I was asking you to be part of this panel, that there was like a specific threshold that schools had to meet, and then if they didn't, their funding got reallocated. Is that correct?
From my understanding, they just had to accept it within that Utah grant system, like the online system we have. And if they were able to accept that and their contract was put in place, we could extend that contract with them, with the beef producer and them.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, Sarah Jane, I want to hear from you as an actual vendor, how you like this program, how it's going.
Yeah, this program has been an awesome opportunity for my husband and I, especially as we're kind of getting our feet really rooted in the agricultural industry. We both grew up in it, but it's a volatile industry. So this is such an awesome opportunity. Something I really want to highlight is the efficiency. I think that this is kind of set up for us. We submitted one bid that all the schools get to utilize, bid pricing. And I really like that. That was very organized, and it's been really simple as I don't have a bunch of staff, that you can order through or receive. It's just me. So I have schools that are texting me, emailing me, calling me, and we're handling it. It's just so straightforward. They might ask a few questions, but a lot of it, was already answered in the bid process. So a lot of them are going, hey, here's my delivery address. This is the time frame that you can deliver in. And here is the amounts I want to order. I think kind of some of the struggles for us was figuring out some of these logistics, before this opportunity. Some of my biggest orders I ever moved were 500 pounds. So I know the first school, Provo, when they ordered, it was as much as my little freezer trailer would haul. It was close to 5,000 pounds. And we got there, and then the ground level dock. So I lifted 5,000 pounds from the dock up to from the ground up to the high dock. And good thing I'm young, got a young back, but I quickly was like, we got to figure out a better logistic, because I'm going to wear schools out with this long process. So, we've learned some things, and now we're working with someone else that has a larger freezer trailer that has, they're just totally set up for school delivery. So that was something that we've had to really work through, is those logistics. And then the warehousing logistics with our processor is something we've had to really work through, especially on some bigger orders, just making sure we have enough freezer space and capacity and all that fun stuff. But this has been a really, really, really fun and exciting project for us to be involved in.
Yeah, thanks for saying that and talking about logistics, because I think when we talk about this program, we talk about scaling up for local farmers. And so that's a key example. I guess I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you a follow-up. That's
Yeah.
like, were you selling to schools before? How has it been with the new
Yeah.
sort of institutional clients for you?
Yeah, it's been, not really. I was not really selling to schools before. We're a cow-calf operation, and we have a small direct-to-consumer business. So I understood the logistics on a small scale, but primarily our animals enter the traditional, I guess, supply food chain, and we're not involved at all with the processing, scheduling, processing, and then delivering it to the customer. So luckily we got to do this. We've been logistically working on this small scale. So we kind of understand what it would take. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I think so. When I was emailing Danny and Natalie first about this program, one of you shared some survey feedback with me, and it was really positive. And so I guess I'll pass it to Natalie. Like, what are some successes? What are some details that you've seen or heard throughout this process of implementation?
Yeah, I would just say on the school side, we do have a lot of just qualitative data, but just as Sarah said, on the farmer rancher side, the system was just really easy for schools and administrators, and there weren't, really any complaints there. There's been conversations about like, hey, we want it, in this form versus this form, and it seems that most ranches have been able to accommodate that. So just really positive there. And then another one we learned about this weekend when we were visiting that ranch that participates in southern Utah, is that this ranch particularly also participates in agritourism. So they have a restaurant on site, and who they source some of their food products from for the restaurant also distributes to a lot of the schools. So he said, hey, I have the school in northern Utah that is purchasing my meat. Could you, when you come deliver food here, could I put my meat on your truck and you bring it up? And they're like, well, we don't do it that way. We usually buy it and then sell it at our cost to schools, but they were able to negotiate this whole new relationship that distributor had never done before. So that's been really cool to hear about. So hopefully that's a way to just start, clearly the farmers are educating the distributors, saying, hey, this local food is really a desire in schools now. So it's something that you should maybe be getting ahead of and starting to prepare for. And then also with that, the distributor is now buying all remaining beef from this rancher for other sites that they sell to. So that's been a huge success and really cool to hear about, kind of even outside of the program and beyond for that rancher.
Yeah, that's really great. It's nice to hear about sort of the ripple effects of incentives and capture those stories. I'm also really interested in local beef and bison because it's versatile. And so I'm wondering, Natalie, have you been capturing any like unique recipes or outcomes or fun things that come with just beef as a product?
Yeah, and I think like what Kate said, what's nice about beef is that a lot of the schools already did it. So I've been in the cafeterias and taste tested just, the tacos that they're already putting on their plate using the beef. So there's that, right? So it's simple. The recipes there, like that we said, some have, maybe use a little more meat just because it cooks down differently because it's higher quality. And then with the bison particularly, Danny mentioned this, but we are doing a bison cooking workshop, and we worked with someone who has, a connection to Native communities and can add that flair to the recipe she's creating as well, and also knows how to scale it at a large scale for cafeterias. It's not just, here's this recipe to use at home and then multiply it by whatever you need. It also meets the school standards for child nutrition. So we're really excited to kick that off next weekend, and all the schools that serve bison will be getting a recipe book so they can continue incorporating this and also meet the chef firsthand. So hopefully they can make that relationship too and continue, incorporating also the importance of bison, the history of bison, you know, into when they serve it in the cafeteria.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a unique product, definitely. So it's great that this is sort of broadening the farm to school horizons. Sarah Jane, I'm gonna ask you, so you live in Colorado, and we had a little discussion about the regional aspect of the Local Food for
Yeah.
Schools program. I'm wondering, you were sort of talking about the Colorado local food incentive and this incentive. And so I'm wondering, like, what benefits you see to this model and that model? Yeah.
Colorado's kind of having some issues really launching theirs large scale, but what I've really seen is just, I really liked how the state of Utah did the bid, and it was one big bid and all the schools can pull from it. I feel like right now a lot of the staff in Colorado seem maybe a bit overwhelmed that they have to organize the bid process. Then they got to review the bid process. And then they have to, it's just what's taking now probably each school in Utah, you know, not very, you know, 30 minutes in their day to put in the order. It seems like it's maybe taking a lot longer, a week or more. It's taking a lot of time and resources. The other thing I really like about the Utah setup is it seems like right now, when we deliver to small schools, we're able to hit multiple small schools and they're working together and kind of getting to, you know, have a manageable delivery fee because of that. And right now, I just don't think Colorado schools are quite organized enough. They're all trying to do it on their own. And you guys did a really great job providing us like a long list of contacts. And so if I knew I had room on my freezer trailer, you know, and I was going to be passing a couple schools, I was able to send them an email and go, hey, I'm going to be coming through in a month. Would you guys be interested? You know, here's what products we have and have been approved with the state. So I really like that kind of setup. I think it's creating a smoother start anyway for this.
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah. Any other questions on it?
No, I think there's something to be said about like the freedom in Colorado's, you know, giving them the funds to buy whatever local foods they want, but then you sort of lose, like there's this trade-off, right? Where in Utah it's limited, but it's also a lot easier. And in Colorado, there's more freedom, but there's more work on nonprofit partners and school food service directors. So yeah, it's like not an either or, it's just sort of thinking about
different.
Yeah, the pros and cons, and it's really unique that you're sort of in that space where you can see both as a producer. So that's why thanks for entertaining that one.
Definitely.
So I think I'm gonna backtrack it back up to Kate, because you know, I would be remiss if I didn't ask more about socially disadvantaged, quote unquote, producers and how those are being tracked or supported or promoted during implementation. And so as the designer of this program, I'm wondering like how you think this program is doing in terms of supporting the kind of farmers that we want to support.
Yeah, so we were a little bit lucky in Utah, and that's sort of baked into our agriculture landscape in that we have a lot of small producers. Most of our farms are still family owned. So targeting small producers is almost a given. We would have to try really, really hard to not get a small producer actually contracted with us. I think Sarah Jane is actually our biggest one. And then looking at like other aspects of socially disadvantaged, we had ongoing discussions with the Ute tribe about getting their bison into schools, and just the moment hadn't been there yet. So we were really hopeful when this came along that they would be able to do that. And then one of the really exciting things was seeing how many women ranchers were out there, because that's not necessarily like people's vision of ranching or who's doing ranching. And we got all these applications from incredible women-owned ranches and people, you know, running a ranch with their sister or their mom or their husband. And that was so fun and so cool to see. And it's been really cool to have those interactions. And then just logistically, it's been super easy to track because the state agency has all the contracts. So we're not getting an invoice from a school and being like, who'd you buy from? Like, we already know that piece of it and we know who they're with. And so that piece is pretty much set and dried right now. Like, we know who we've targeted and contracted with. And I think that ended up working out really well in terms of being able to benefit those producers.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for saying that sort of logistic point. Okay. Now I'm going to transition because I know we've been talking a lot about the benefits, and I'm not trying to be super fluffy, even though I think this is a great program. I know there's got to be challenges. And so lightning round, I'm going to ask you each, just name a challenge. It's okay if you haven't worked through it, but there's definitely things that can be learned here. So Kate, since you already have the mic, what's a challenge?
It takes a long time to implement this, and like, we're so grateful we got that 12-month extension from AMS, because we wouldn't have been able to spend all the funds otherwise. We actually ended up doing 2 rounds of procurement, even because we had people, really great qualified producers, after the first deadline passed, being like, dear Kate, I would be interested. And we wanted more volume, so luckily we were able to do a second round. But even then, after that one, we've had producers who are like, hey, I'd love to get involved. And that is great, but there's a balance between being like, we want to pull them in and keep them involved and connect them with schools, with also like, this was kind of a one-time thing. So the timing was tricky.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And that's shared amongst, I think, a lot of agencies across the nation. So good. Yeah, these things take time. Danny, what about you?
Yes, I'll just reiterate what Kate said. Everything takes a fun amount of time. And by fun, I mean long, because government. But for me, a challenge specifically has, as I've been in the transition of like overseeing this program and working kind of behind the scenes, like reallocating those funds in our Utah grant system is not as simple as I would like it to be. So that being said, it's in the works and it's happening based on our contract extension. So that's great.
Yeah, state agencies. I'm really happy to work alongside you. Natalie, what about you?
I think this is a good challenge, but just branches who are saying what's next. So what I'm being mindful of and aware of is just how to transition them into that enhanced local reimbursement program, and making sure schools are prepared and just being ahead of the game. Because we've even heard ranchers say like, I'll buy more cows. And we're like, like, don't buy more cows. And then we're, the school decide for some reason to not continue buying local, which sounds crazy. But yeah, so just I'm trying to do what I can do right now to just over the next year, like really help with that transition for schools and ranches.
Yeah, that is so real. And that's the last question. So happy to hear more about potentially what's next. But I think, yeah, Sarah Jane, any challenges on your end?
I think I kind of touched on it already in the one of the above questions, but the warehousing and just like delivery logistics were something we had to kind of overcome, and warehousing is still something, just with things, sometimes the school's like, we're ready to receive it, and they're like, we need to wait, we don't quite have space. So I'm like, whew, I got to make space, so that's just something we're overcoming, and I'm not complaining, it's just part of the process. So
Yeah, definitely. Institutional markets have some growing pains. So part of the goals of this webinar was to provide recommendations for other states. And so I'm wondering if, Natalie, if you have any specific recommendations for yourself or others on how you would improve what's been happening.
One that we kind of have talked about as a team is, now that, we've been through almost one school year of this, is just having some like farmer to farmer conversations, or even school to school conversations. So if there's a school that's already participated or already we hear that another school is going to start purchasing from a specific farmer that's been in this program, just having these schools to connect to say, hey, this is what worked best for me working with that rancher, and this is how their product is usually delivered, things like that. And then also the rancher to rancher side, like having Sarah being able to talk to maybe another rancher that's going to sell the schools to someday, or to another rancher that's selling to a school, just to say, like, this is how I troubleshot that problem. So yeah, just kind of connecting everyone else who's involved.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, and when it's product specific and you sort of already have a pool of producers you're working with in the future, if this program were replicated, it would be even easier to do that peer learning. Okay, last question. And Danny, I think feel free to also add recommendations if you have any more that you want to add. But really, I'm wondering what's next for Utah. So you started with beef and bison, you're sort of getting it underway, but the fund's running out. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I can kind of start us off. So I know Natalie mentioned this too, but after speaking with a rancher this weekend and other ranchers that Natalie and I have met in the past like few months, we really came to the conclusion that relationship building has been a huge part of this and is very important for the success of things like this. So having that direct school to rancher communication has been helpful and bridging for both parties involved. So we'll keep doing that and keep helping in whatever capacity we can as state agencies. And I do see that there is a possibility to maybe extend contracts beyond the funding period, so that schools can continue to benefit from the procurement when they're no longer being reimbursed. But if they have those helpful relationships, those constructive relationships that they've already built, then that's going to just work alongside that really well. So this was and is kind of like training wheels for both sides, for schools and farmers. I also think there's potential for restructuring Utah's local purchase incentive. So that's like our enhanced local reimbursement that I mentioned earlier. To just like expand this model further. And some schools are even wanting to buy off-contract items from these producers. So that's really been cool to see. So these off-contract purchases can still be eligible for enhanced local reimbursement and are just a great way for schools to experiment with the new products. And now they have a relationship, like I said, with these producers and these local vendors. So that has been really cool to see. And it gives me a lot of hope for the future. And I really can't wait to just continue our momentum.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. And it's great to have such willing folks in power to sort of spearhead that. So just to clarify, I guess now that sort of the bidding process and everything is underway, you're sort of saying that you might still be able to administer a statewide bid, but just if there's no funding, then they would have the bid, but they would have to pay for it themselves, they meaning the schools. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, it would just be off contract items, or they can keep their contract and keep purchasing those items. They just can't get reimbursed through that LFS grant, because if there's no money from that, we can't reimburse them.
Yeah, I think now I'm like or last week I was thinking about it, and now that you're confirming my suspicion, I'm thinking about sort of an alternative way for some states that don't have the funding for a local incentive. Like, how can they support this in a really hands-on way? And I think this could be a potential model that's not necessarily monetary. I mean, of course, there's administrative work being done and relationship work, but I think, yeah, it's almost like another alternative model is supporting it at the state without funds. Super cool. Okay, Kate, as someone who has left the state government role and now you're in your USDA hat, I'm wondering what you see or want to see as next steps for this program.
So I think all of Danny's plans are really exciting. And I certainly would love if like a new like LFS stage 2 materialized, but that's not right around the corner. But I do think one thing that's really exciting, if some folks might be aware already, but we had a new final rule published last week to align the school meal standards with the new dietary guidelines. And part of that is going to allow schools to use local as a specification when they're developing solicitations. And that I think will make this a lot easier, because that was something really nice about with this LFS funding. A condition of the grant was that it had to be sourced within 400 miles. So we could build that into our procurement specifications in a way that previously we haven't been able to. And so moving forward with this new rule, that'll be really nice, because you can say, we're doing a contract for within our state or within X mile radius. So lots more to come on that. I don't want to jump ahead of ourselves in terms of like, there's a memo coming out in a Q&A, and there'll be lots of training too. But if that's something that you are interested in, like general you to anyone out there, if you're interested in doing like a bigger local procurement and want to know how to do that, I would sit tight for a little bit till that guidance comes out, because I think it'll make your life a lot easier, and that's really exciting.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for spreading the word, and thanks for that insider scoop on what's next from the USDA. I think it's a game changer. So I think this webinar is really well timed to talk about procurement and contracting, and now this rule came out. So it's super exciting. Okay, I'm going to open it up for some questions. I see we had some in the chat, and I think Kate, you've been on top of it. So let me review. That's great. Okay, so extending the contract with USDA was relatively easy. If there's any other questions, put them in the chat. I have some from registration, so I'll ask while we let others come in. Knowing what you know now, how would you design an ideal state purchase in Utah for these or other products? So we sort of talked on like what you recommend, but maybe if we could spend a little bit more time about designing the process, like, and then during this, I was thinking about forward contracting and how long would you give the producers time to raise their animals or grow their product or anything like that, like in terms of timing and in terms of designing a program, what would that look like? I'll let anyone go.
I can jump in, and then we'll let the others take it. But I think something Natalie touched on was producer training. And I think that would be a huge, huge piece of it that would just make everything go more smoothly. And I think what that goes with an extended timeline, right? Which we were really moving this on a time crunch, but if you were just designing this in a perfect world, I think opening up that solicitation and having it open up for a really long time so that everybody has a chance to answer questions, and getting some of that producer to producer training, but also just having some conversations around like, this is what it's like to sell to a school, and this is what they need. Because I know we definitely had, like, I had a school call me and they were like, this person that contracted for patties says they're going to give me 4-ounce patties. Am I supposed to feed a 4-ounce patty to a kindergartner? And I'm like, no. And then you talk to their answer and they're like, well, that's the mold I have for patties. And like, okay, well, we specified that it was, smaller than that. And so I think a lot of those things could have just been worked out beforehand. And I think there's a lot of really great resources for that, and there's the Bringing the Farm to School curriculum. And just when when that first came out, Natalie's position at UDAF didn't exist. And even when we started this program, her position didn't exist. So I think there's a lot more capacity for that now, and would just make things go even more smoothly and more, just better communication from the start. And then I think drawing that timeline out too could address some of that forward contracting issue too. If we were looking at, say, 2-year contracts from the start, that could be really helpful as well.
That's a good one.
I just think building on that, a lot of that is also just making sure the ranchers know what farm to school is and what other programs we offer. Because I think a lot of it was like a professional bid side of things. I'm going to sell my food to schools, and that's great. But they're learning the more we work with them that we're also really, invested in ag education, and they never thought about offering a field trip, or just that, like the local reimbursement process exists after this. So just really, hearing what they could use, because they're having ranchers and other farms come to them and hearing about what they're doing and wanting to do it too. And I don't think they're, until now, have been really set up to like tell their story and tell them what farm to fork is. So just even, having, small handouts for them to hand out, because we don't expect them, to memorize the local reimbursement guidelines, but something that they could, maybe give to other farmers and ranchers to help assist us with the outreach and be a tool for us as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's all about the education is sort of something I'm gleaning from this discussion. So that's really nice to hear. Sarah Jane, I'm interested. I know I sort of asked you this before, and you're like, I'm not the right person to talk about policy, but I think you are, because you are someone who's being impacted by policy. And so I'm wondering how you would design a program to best fit producers like you in the future.
You know, really quick though, I do want to touch on, I love the ag education piece, and that's why I made a video. I think it's so cool. This is such an awesome opportunity for the producers that are raising the food, raising the beef, to tell the story. No one else is telling our story. It's just us telling it straight to the school. So that's been a really cool piece, and I'm excited to see how that grows. I think something that I've really found, I guess something for me, if I would talk to other producers, is as far as beef goes, is our beef breaks down a lot more than just ground beef. You know, we have hearts, we have tongues, we have oxtail, we have cheeks, some really awesome products. And I think when I was a small scale direct to consumer, I kind of just I had little outlets for those things, and now, you know, we have a larger quantity of those things, and I think that's a very huge piece of really trying to help offset those processing costs. So I think that that's a piece, and I'm still brainstorming, and I would love to brainstorm with more producers on what they're doing with like the products they can't sell to the schools. Like, what are you doing with your cheeks and your tongues and your hides? And I think that if we can grow that piece alongside, you know, this opportunity with farm to school, we're going to become, you know, just more sustainable and stronger, and be able to get more competitive with our bids. I think right now, every producer involved, our biggest calculation is the bid was our processing cost. And our processing cost is huge, but I mean, it's not because they're not doing anything more extensive than big packers. We're not offsetting it with those sort of I seen just someone put something in the chat there about organ meat. Let's pull it up real quick. Someone needs to start an organ meat. Yeah. So I've actually started a pet food company with our organ meat, and I've done some sliced organ meat for sliced heart and liver, and then we're doing lots of dried dog food and pet food bones, and still it's a slow launch though.
Yeah.
So like your comment, Jennifer, though.
Yeah, that's really, and I was sort of thinking that sort of lends into something we didn't mention that's a little taboo, but I think about dignity pricing and how a lot of schools are used to paying nothing for beef, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, Sarah Jane, how you experience this. Like, I mean, obviously you put a bid in and you got the bid, but do you feel like the prices that make sense to you and like your worth and your business model were met through this program?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, I was able to, especially as I was delivering and unpacking thousands of pounds by hand, I had a lot of time to talk with different schools. And something we both talked about is, you know, they're like, wow, we're paying a ton. And I said, you know, though, I'm basically priced my stuff at market value. And this gives me cash flow. That's the opportunity of farm to school. And so I said, the biggest thing is this is giving us an opportunity though, to get more efficient in offsetting our processing costs. You know, I think that's why our beef, two things. We have a higher standard too. Like we're grinding in, you know, some New York, some sirloins into our ground beef. Our ground beef is tasty. You know, I think that when you're not working directly with the rancher, I think you can cut in the lower quality cuts, and you go, hey, we need to give these to our super budget conscious, schools. And so they get, that's why they're getting a lower quality product. And
Mhm.
I'm rambling a little bit now, but I think, did I kind of answer your question there?
Yeah, you did. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's also maybe no answer of like, there's always this tension between farmers and schools in terms of being, having your worth and your price met, and
Yeah.
then trying to be,
Yeah.
they're so used to being underfunded. So I think it's just maybe back to education where it's like,
Yeah.
we talk about the true cost of food and support that.
Yeah.
My last question, I think is for Natalie, Danny, and it's from registration, and it's how are you going to evaluate this program? Like, I know there's probably no funding for it, but as someone who's interested in sharing your story, you mentioned surveys. How are you gonna evaluate this program?
I'll kind of just give an overview of that, and then Natalie, you go ahead and give any logistics we want to do for surveys. But I was going to say we have Natalie now, which is so wonderful because we have two agencies working on this together and collaborating together. So our capacity has already increased for doing evaluation, I think. And I think ideally, just to kind of recap what everyone said, we need to have a longer solicitation, have the farmers or ranchers kind of troubleshoot among themselves. So that could be part of our evaluation too, the more I think about it. And then schools, having them come to us again with what they want or might need, or any pivots that we need to make. So just more time and outreach for that. And yeah, I think this will be a huge part of our evaluation process in the next few months. And we just want to make this strong and sustainable, like Sarah Jane said. So, but we also want to consider capacity.
Right.
Yeah, I would just say, there's like the hard evaluation, but also just continue to talk with everyone. I really want to just like get everyone on a Zoom call after and just let everyone share their experiences, one with the schools, one with the ranchers, and then potentially one with, both, whether it's all the schools that worked with a particular ranch or, yeah, so we've just kind of been thinking about how that would be the most effective way to move forward with that, but those will definitely be happening at some point. Just to let them know we're listening to and that we're here for improvement and helping them have a successful school year next year with the program.
I love that. Yeah, lowercase e evaluation is just as good as uppercase E. Well, thank you all. Thanks everyone for coming today. Thank you to our presenters for your work and for dreaming up this wild program and administering it and participating in it. And I'm so excited for what's next. So thanks for all you do. Okay, have a great day, everyone. Bye.